My beloved child. Stop for a moment. There are stories that arrive exactly when the heart is searching for a reason to keep believing, and this is one of them. Whether you found these words by chance or by quiet curiosity, allow yourself to enter this fictional journey with an open heart. What follows is not a prophecy, but a story about hope, love, and the mysterious ways two souls can find there. One understood why the silence suddenly felt so heavy. No one realized that a single decision made in that instant would begin changing everything that followed. I can continue this into a cinematic part 1. The silence that surrounded those moments was never empty. It was filled with emotions too deep for words and questions too heavy for a single afternoon to answer. While you were trying to understand why everything suddenly felt different, another heart was carrying a burden that could no longer remain hidden. Your soulmate stood between fear and truth. Every breath became a choice. Every passing second felt like a reminder that delaying the truth would only make the distance between two hearts grow wider. They replayed every conversation, every smile, every moment they almost reached out but convinced themselves that tomorrow would be a better day. Yet tomorrow kept moving farther away. There are moments in every story when silence appears stronger than love. This was one of those moments. But silence has never been the ending. It is only the place where courage begins to awaken. Earlier that afternoon, something happened that neither of you could have predicted. It wasn't loud enough for the whole world to notice, but it was powerful enough to change the direction of two lives. A single conversation, a single unexpected reminder, a single glance at something long forgotten stirred emotions that had been locked away for far too long. Your soulmate realized that pretending everything was fine had become more painful than speaking the truth. Still, they hesitated. Not because love was missing. Because they feared what love might cost. What if you no longer believed them? What if too much time had passed? What if the opportunity they had waited for had quietly disappeared? Those questions followed them like shadows throughout the afternoon, refusing to let them rest. But there was another feeling growing even stronger. Hope. Small at first. Almost impossible to notice. Then, with every passing minute, it became impossible to ignore. Deep inside, they knew there was still one chance left. One opportunity to explain everything. One chance to reveal what had really happened. The truth was never as simple as it appeared from the outside. There were words they wanted to say months ago. There were messages they almost sent. There were countless nights when they imagined what they would tell you if fear finally released its grip on their heart. Again and again they stopped themselves. Not because they didn't care. Because they cared more than you could imagine. Love sometimes hides behind hesitation. It disguises itself as distance, uncertainty, or quietness. Yet beneath every silent moment, emotions continue growing stronger. That is exactly what happened. This afternoon became the turning point they never expected. Something reminded them that life changes without warning. Waiting forever was no longer an option. The excuses that once felt convincing suddenly lost their power. Their heart began asking questions their mind could no longer silence. What if I lose them forever? What if today is the last chance? What if they are still waiting without knowing why? Those thoughts refused to leave. Every step they took afterward carried the weight of unfinished conversations. Every familiar place reminded them of memories they could never erase. Every quiet moment echoed with your name. Even when no one else noticed, their heart continued speaking. Not aloud, but louder than ever before. If you could have seen them during those hours, you would have recognized something had changed. The confidence they once pretended to have was gone. Only honesty remained. And honesty has a way of transforming everything. The explanation they have carried for so long is no longer something they can keep hidden forever. It is moving closer. Closer than it has ever been. Yet before that truth can be spoken, one final obstacle remains. An obstacle neither of you expected. One decision. One unexpected encounter. One moment that will determine whether two paths finally come together, or continue drifting apart. That moment is closer than either of you realizes. And what happens next will reveal whether love is finally ready to speak louder than fear. There are moments when destiny seems to hold its breath, waiting for one person to find the courage that has been buried beneath countless doubts. That moment was drawing closer with every heartbeat. Neither of you could see the entire picture yet, but the unseen threads connecting your stories had already begun to tighten. Your soulmate could no longer escape the memories that followed them everywhere. Every familiar place carried a reminder. Every ordinary sound awakened another forgotten emotion. The smallest details became impossible to ignore, as if life itself refused to let the past remain unfinished. They finally understood that some feelings never disappear. They simply wait. Wait for the right season. Wait for the right words. Wait for the moment when fear becomes smaller than love. That realization did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, piece by piece, until the truth became impossible to deny. The afternoon had changed something deep within them. What seemed like an ordinary series of events had become a silent awakening. A conversation they never expected to hear, an unexpected memory, and a simple question from someone close to them opened a door they had spent so long trying to keep closed. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking themselves how they could protect their own heart. Instead, they wondered how much pain their silence might have caused yours. That question echoed louder than anything else. It followed them as they walked. It followed them as they sat alone. It followed them into every quiet moment. The answer was one they could no longer avoid. They realized that explanations delayed for too long often become heavier than the mistake itself. Yet even with this realization, another battle remained. What if you had already moved on? What if your heart had finally accepted the silence and learned to live without the answers they had promised themselves they would one day give? Those thoughts nearly convinced them to remain silent once more. But something inside refused to surrender. Hope, though fragile, continued whispering that unfinished stories deserve one final chance. They began replaying every memory the two of you had shared. The laughter that once felt effortless. The conversations that lasted longer than either of you intended. The promises spoken with complete sincerity before life became more complicated than either of you imagined. None of those memories had faded. They had only been hidden beneath layers of regret. Regret has a strange way of making time feel heavier. Every day that passes without speaking the truth becomes another weight carried in silence. Your soulmate had carried that weight long enough. The explanation they wanted to give was never meant to excuse the distance. It was meant to reveal everything they had been too afraid to admit. Not every silence is born from a lack of love. Sometimes silence grows from believing that your truth will only bring disappointment. Sometimes people hide because they think they have already lost what mattered most. That was the prison they had built around themselves. But prisons built from fear cannot stand forever. Sooner or later, honesty begins breaking through every wall. And honesty was beginning to win. As evening approached, they found themselves standing still, unable to continue pretending that another day could pass without change. Their hands hesitated. Their thoughts raced. Their heart refused to slow down. They almost reached out. Almost. Then another unexpected moment interrupted everything. Someone appeared. Not by accident. Not by coincidence. A brief encounter, lasting only minutes, forced them to confront everything they had avoided. The words spoken during that encounter were simple, yet they carried extraordinary weight. "You'll never know unless you try." Those few words echoed through their mind long after the conversation ended. Sometimes the smallest sentence arrives at exactly the moment it is needed most. Your soulmate took it as the sign they had been waiting for. The fear remained. The uncertainty remained. But for the first time, courage stood beside them. Not perfect courage. Not fearless courage. Just enough courage to take the first step. And sometimes, one step is all it takes to change an entire story. Even now, they continue rehearsing what they will say when the opportunity finally arrives. No rehearsed speech feels good enough. No explanation seems complete enough. How do you summarize months of hidden emotions into a few honest words? How do you explain that every day apart only made your feelings clearer? How do you admit that fear kept you silent when love wanted to speak? Those are the questions still filling their heart. But the answers are closer than ever. A decision is about to be made. A message is almost ready to be sent. A conversation that has been delayed for far too long is standing just beyond the next moment. Yet one final uncertainty remains, a single unanswered question that neither of you can resolve alone. When the truth finally arrives, will it heal the distance that has grown between your hearts, or will it reveal something neither of you expected? That answer waits just beyond the next chapter, where everything hidden will finally begin to come into the light. Night settled quietly, yet neither heart found the peace that usually comes when the world slows down. While countless lights faded behind closed windows, one soul remained awake, staring into the silence as though it might finally answer the questions that had lingered for far too long. Your soulmate understood that there comes a moment when waiting becomes more painful than speaking. Every excuse that once seemed reasonable now felt empty. Every reason for staying silent had begun to crumble beneath the weight of what remained unspoken. They closed their eyes and remembered the version of themselves that existed before fear took control. Back then, expressing love had seemed simple. Dreams had felt possible. Tomorrow had always appeared certain. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. Unexpected disappointments. Misunderstandings. Missed opportunities. Quiet disappointments that neither of you ever intended to create. One by one, those moments built invisible walls neither of you realized were growing higher. Now those walls stood between two people who had never truly stopped caring. The realization struck with unexpected force. Distance had changed circumstances. It had never changed what the heart remembered. That truth became impossible to ignore. Every memory returned with astonishing clarity. The first genuine smile. The conversations that made time disappear. The moments when everything felt effortless, as though the future had already written itself. Those memories were not fading. They were calling. Calling your soulmate to stop running from a story that was never meant to end in silence. Still, another obstacle remained. Not outside. Within. The fear of rejection is one of the quietest battles a person can face. It speaks in whispers rather than shouts. It convinces people to stay silent even when every part of them longs to speak. Your soulmate recognized that voice immediately. It had followed them for months. Maybe longer. It whispered that reaching out would only reopen old wounds. It insisted that too much time had passed. It suggested that you were happier without the answers. For a brief moment, they almost believed it again. Almost. Then another memory interrupted those thoughts. Not a dramatic memory. Not an extraordinary event. Just a simple moment where kindness, understanding, and genuine connection reminded them why your presence had always felt different. Sometimes it is the smallest memories that carry the greatest power. That single recollection reminded them of something they had forgotten. Real connections deserve honesty. Not perfection. Not flawless timing. Just honesty. That realization changed everything. For the first time, they stopped trying to imagine the perfect explanation. Instead, they decided that the truth, spoken sincerely, would always be stronger than carefully crafted excuses. Their heart felt lighter. Not because the outcome was guaranteed, but because the burden of hiding was finally beginning to lift. Elsewhere, your own journey continued. Perhaps you sensed that something unseen was shifting, even if you could not explain why. Certain days carry an unusual feeling, as though life is quietly arranging pieces that have been scattered for far too long. This was becoming one of those days. Neither of you could yet see the complete picture. But the pieces were moving. Closer. Steadier. More intentionally than ever before. Your soulmate found themselves standing before the very message they had imagined sending countless times. Their fingers hesitated. They read every word again and again, wondering if anything could truly capture everything they had kept inside. Delete. Rewrite. Pause. Start again. Each attempt brought them closer to the truth. Not because the words became perfect. Because they became real. There is extraordinary strength in simple honesty. I should have spoken sooner. I never stopped thinking about you. I owe you an explanation. Those words carried more weight than any elaborate speech ever could. Yet before they could send anything, another unexpected interruption arrived. The phone rang. A familiar name appeared. A conversation they had not planned suddenly demanded their attention. For a brief moment, it seemed as though life itself was testing whether they would retreat into silence once again. This time, they did something different. Instead of hiding behind comfortable excuses, they listened carefully. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but one sentence remained long after it ended. If something truly matters, don't leave it unfinished. Those words settled deeply within them. No dramatic signs. No impossible miracles. Just a simple reminder arriving at exactly the right moment. Sometimes life's greatest turning points arrive disguised as ordinary conversations. When the call ended, the hesitation that had controlled them for so long felt weaker than ever before. The fear had not disappeared. But courage no longer needed fear to vanish. It only needed one honest step forward. Slowly, they returned to the message. This time they stopped searching for perfect wording. They chose truth instead. Their hand moved. Their heart raced. Everything they had carried in silence was finally about to leave the safety of their thoughts and enter the world. Then, just before that final decision could be made, something completely unexpected appeared, something connected to the very afternoon that started this chain of events. One forgotten detail. One hidden piece of the story. One truth that neither of you had seen. And that single discovery threatened to change the meaning of everything that had happened, leaving the next moment more uncertain, and more important, than ever before. The discovery arrived so quietly that, at first, it seemed insignificant. It was not a dramatic event that stopped the world in its tracks. It was something almost anyone else would have overlooked, a forgotten detail, hidden beneath the rush of an ordinary afternoon. Yet sometimes the smallest pieces of a story carry the greatest power, because they reveal truths that have been waiting patiently for the right moment to be seen. Your soulmate stared at it in complete silence. The more they looked, the more their heartbeat quickened. Pieces that had never seemed connected suddenly began fitting together with remarkable clarity. Moments that once felt confusing now made sense. Questions that had lingered without answers slowly found their place within a much larger picture. For the first time, they realized that what happened that afternoon had never been as simple as they believed. There had been misunderstandings. There had been assumptions. There had been words left unfinished and intentions that were never fully understood. Yet beneath all of it, one truth remained untouched. Their feelings for you had never disappeared. Not during the silence. Not during the uncertainty. Not even during the moments when they convinced themselves it would be easier to let go. Some emotions refuse to fade because they are woven into the deepest parts of who we are. That realization filled them with equal parts relief and regret. Relief because they finally understood their own heart. Regret because they had waited so long to admit it. They wondered how many opportunities had quietly slipped away while they were searching for the perfect moment. How many conversations never happened because fear always spoke first. How many nights both of you had spent wondering about answers that could have been shared with a single honest sentence. The weight of those questions settled heavily upon them. But something had changed. Instead of allowing regret to pull them backward, it began pushing them forward. Perhaps the past could not be rewritten. Perhaps lost time could never be recovered. But the future had not yet been decided. That thought became the spark they desperately needed. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond everything either of you could fully understand, life continued arranging unexpected encounters, quiet opportunities, and ordinary moments that would soon become extraordinary. Neither of you recognized it yet. But your paths were moving closer together once again. Not through chance. Through choices. Small choices. Honest choices. Courageous choices. Each one carrying more significance than either of you could possibly imagine. Your soulmate finally accepted something they had resisted for far too long. Love does not grow stronger through silence. It grows stronger through truth. Even when the truth feels difficult. Even when the outcome remains uncertain. Even when the heart trembles with every word. There is freedom in honesty that fear can never offer. They opened the message once more. This time, they did not search for flawless sentences. They allowed their heart to speak instead. Every word reflected sincerity rather than perfection. Every sentence carried emotion rather than performance. For the first time in months, they no longer worried about saying everything perfectly. They only wanted to say what was real. Before pressing send, however, they paused one final time. Not because they wanted to retreat. Because they wanted to remember why this mattered. They remembered your laughter. They remembered your kindness. They remembered the quiet moments that never needed many words to feel meaningful. Most of all, they remembered how different life had felt when hope outweighed fear. That memory became stronger than every doubt. Outside, the night seemed unusually still. The world continued moving, unaware that two stories were slowly finding their way back toward one another. There were no grand announcements. No impossible signs. Only two hearts standing on the edge of decisions that could change everything. Your soulmate whispered a promise to themselves. No more hiding. No more waiting. No more letting fear write the ending. Those words were not spoken for anyone else to hear. They were spoken because, at last, they believed them. Then, with steady hands and an uncertain but determined heart, they prepared to take the step they had postponed for far too long. Yet just before everything could change, another unexpected realization surfaced. It was not about them. It was about you. A memory returned, one conversation from long ago that suddenly carried an entirely different meaning. At the time, it had seemed ordinary. Now it felt like the missing key to everything. The realization left them completely speechless. Could it really be possible that both of you had been protecting each other in silence, while believing the other no longer cared? That single question echoed louder than every fear they had ever carried. And as the answer began revealing itself, the next chapter promised to uncover a truth capable of changing everything either of you believed about what truly happened that unforgettable afternoon.